Visualize a killer so cold-blooded that they mock their victims' families in court, spitting on the face of justice and showing zero guilt for their crimes. These are the cases where killers shamelessly disrespected the court and made fun of their loved ones, leaving everyone stunned by their heartless behavior.
I did kill Kenyatta Band. But I want you to tell it like it is if you gonna tell it.
Understand what I'm saying? You know, let's just make this painless and not. Give me my 100 years or whatever, and give me the out of here.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, well do it!
Ferguson continued to argue with the judge.
You understand me?
What you want.
I'm not doing this in front of these stupid cameras.
All right.
Don't touch me,
Reads, we the jury duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled cause do find our verdict upon the count submitted to us as follows. On count one, the verdict is guilty. That's murder in the first degree. They did not consider the lesser included offenses. On count two, murder in the first degree, the verdict is guilty, and the jury did not consider the lesser included offenses. On count three, attempted murder in the first degree, the verdict is guilty. On count four, the verdict, assault in the first degree, the verdict is guilty. On count five, intimidation in the second degree, the verdict is guilty. On count six, intimidation in the second degree, the verdict is guilty. On count seven, unlawful use of a weapon, the verdict is guilty. On count eight, menacing, the verdict is guilty. On count 9, intimidation in the second degree, the verdict is guilty. On count 10, assault in the second degree, the verdict is guilty.
On May 26, 2017, on a Max Light Rail train in Portland, Oregon, when Jeremy Christian committed a violent attack that left 2 men dead and a third seriously injured. The day began like any other, but tensions grew when Christian began shouting racist and anti-Muslim slogans at 2 young black teenagers, Destiny Mangum and Walia Muhammad.
Well, we got everyone assembled today to receive our verdict, and I understand you have reached and juror 810. Are you the jury foreperson?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Linderholm will retrieve the verdict from you. And I will read the verdict into the record. Which reads, we the jury duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled cause do find our verdict upon the count submitted to us as follows. On count one, the verdict is guilty. That's murder in the first degree. They did not consider the lesser included offenses.
Witnesses reported that he yelled about how colored people were ruining the city and screamed hateful remarks, making it clear that he was not just angry, but filled with deep-seated hatred.
On count 5, intimidation in the second degree, the verdict is guilty. On count 6, intimidation in the second degree, the verdict is guilty.
As the train pulled into the station, 2 brave men, Taliesin Namkai Meche and Ricky Best, interfered to protect the girls. They created a barrier between Christian and the teenagers, trying to push him away.
What I will do is go through each count and ask you as a foreperson whether that was a unanimous verdict. If it was a non-unanimous verdict, then I will need to do an individual call. So on count 1, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On count 2, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On the count 3, attempted murder in the first degree, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On count 4, assault in the first degree, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On count 5, intimidation in the second degree, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On count 6, intimidation in the second degree, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
On count 7, unlawful use of a weapon, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
And count 8, menacing, was that a unanimous verdict?
All of a sudden, Christian pulled out a knife and stabbed Namkai Meche and Best multiple times in a matter of seconds. The train exploded in panic as passengers fled in terror, but Christian continued to wave his knife, creating a scene of utter mess.
And count 9, intimidation in the second degree, was that a unanimous verdict?
Yes, it was.
Count 10, assault in the second degree, was that unanimous?
Yes.
Despite his attempts to escape, other passengers quickly captured him until the police arrived. Christian was arrested just a few blocks away, and as he was taken into custody, He made chilling remarks about his actions, showing no guilt for the lives he had taken. He even claimed he could die in prison a happy man, revealing a disturbing lack of empathy.
Your jury instruction that you should not consider the sentence imposed, what sentence might be imposed if you did return a verdict of guilty, that remains true, but you do play an important role as a jury in determining what facts that I can use later on when I make the decision on what the sentence should be. So we will be having an additional hearing.
In the months that followed, Christian faced trial for his brutal crimes. During the proceedings, he remained unapologetic, insisting he acted in self-defense.
And what I will do is consult with the attorneys regarding the scheduling of that hearing. And before releasing you today, we'll inform you of when you will be needed. You will not be needed past your current termination date of your service, which is February 28th. So we're looking at our hearings being next week, but I'll confirm with you exactly when that will be. So thank you very much for your service and dedication to the case. Mr. Linderholm will escort you to the jury room, and then we'll get you scheduling from there.
However, the evidence was the opposite. In February 2020, he was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and attempted murder, receiving 2 life sentences without the possibility of bail.
That apartment too. You were relentless. You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead. You didn't think he was an intruder. You know, maybe 1 stab wound. Okay, maybe that's 7 defense. But you put in 11 more to make sure he was good and dead. So I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state.
Kamya Gamet's case shocked many when the full details of her crime came to light. On April 16, 2014, Judge John McBain sentenced Gamet to life in prison without the possibility for the brutal murder of her boyfriend, Marcel Hill.
Probably in some kind of domestic, ultimately hit him in the head so hard with a pan that you actually caved in the front of his skull, and then you stabbed him no less than 12 times. And you know what? I was the only one in the courtroom that knew what kind of knife that was. And it was a big old long fillet knife. Because I used it to fillet pike and muskie and salmon. And I'll tell you, you gutted him like a fish in that apartment too. You were relentless. You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead. You didn't think he was an intruder. You know, maybe 1 stab wound. Okay, maybe that's 7 defense. But you put in 11 more to make sure he was good and dead. So I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair. You have 42 days to appeal my sentence and think I've legally erred any.
Gamet and Hill had a volatile on and off relationship filled with arguments and tension. However, no one expected it to end in such a gruesome manner. Gamet snapped on May 18, 2012, during one of their many heated arguments. She attacked Hill in their shared apartment, using whatever she could find to inflict pain. Armed with a lamp, a frying pan, and a knife, she repeatedly struck and stabbed Hill, ultimately leading to his death.
At trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
What made the case even more disturbing was Gamet's behavior in court. Throughout the trial, she showed little to no remorse for her actions. She often appeared indifferent, even smirking and rolling her eyes during the proceedings. This behavior did not go unnoticed by Judge McBain, who, during the sentencing, expressed his disgust and outrage. He clarified that her lack of remorse was as disturbing as the crime.
She was charged with open murder in the death of 38-year-old Marcel Hill. His body was found early Saturday morning in the apartment the two shared on Lansing Avenue. Prosecutors believe she hit him on the head several times with a blunt object, killing him. Judge
McBain didn't hold back during the sentencing. He condemned Gamet for the brutality of her actions, stating that it was one of the worst cases he had ever seen.
He showed you a fraudulent recording where they allege that I beat Kenyatta Barron to death he talked about Mr. Khalil Brown, my neighbor who stayed across the street. But if Mr. Khalil Brown was a help to them proving me guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, they would have called Mr. Khalil Brown. But I called Mr. Khalil Brown to be a witness for me. And I didn't ask him to lie about one thing that he saw that night. I asked him to tell the jury exactly what he saw that night. And you have to ask yourself why that is. Because he's playing a fraudulent damn recording of me beating Kenyatta Barron 15 damn times when that did not happen. And like I told you earlier, you will know the truth, whether in this trial or the next one. Better believe it. If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
All right, Mr. O'Neill, please.
On March 18, 2018, in Riverview, Florida, Ronnie O'Neill III committed inexpressible acts against his family. That night, O'Neill shot his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, with a shotgun, killing her instantly.
Prosecutors showed jurors a bent and broken shotgun they say was used by Ronnie O'Neill to first shoot and then beat Kenyatta Barron to death at their Riverview home. Jurors also watched a video today of the chaotic scene in March of 2018 as recorded by a neighbor. As first responders arrived, Barron's lifeless body was in front of a neighbor's home. The state contends after Ronnie O'Neill killed Kenyatta Barron, he then murdered his disabled daughter with an axe before stabbing his son. In court, O'Neill is acting as his own attorney.
In a display of violence, he then turned on their 9-year-old daughter, Ron Nevaeh, using a hatchet to impose deadly impacts. The brutality didn't stop there. He also attacked his 8-year-old son, Ronnie O'Neill IV, stabbing him and attempting to set him on fire.
Came by and said that there's another child inside the house.
Foster entered the home.
I could see a faint orange glow somewhat off to my left.
And described a nightmarish scene.
And I realized that the floor was covered in blood.
In heavy smoke, he crawled to a back bedroom.
Everything in the room was on fire, so clothes, wall, ceiling. Once again, visibility was limited.
And in the middle of the flames, found what he was looking for.
I thought I had found a patient.
He and another firefighter took the little girl outside, but it was too late.
It began with a frantic 911 call from Kenyatta, desperately begging for help as O'Neill's rage increased. When the police arrived, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Despite suffering severe injuries, little Ronnie managed to survive and later attested against his father, recounting the terrifying events of that night. His bravery in the face of such trauma was nothing short of remarkable.
Ronnie O'Neill screamed and yelled just before killing her and turning his attention to his daughter.
As the case went to trial, O'Neill chose to represent himself, which shocked many. His courtroom behavior was irregular, filled with outbursts and conspiracy theories. He showed no guilt for his actions, claiming he was not sorry for what he did. During the trial, he even attempted to cross-examine his son, a moment that left many in the courtroom stunned.
By the time it's all said and done, you will see who is the mass murderers. In Tampa Bay.
In July 2021, after a jury found him guilty on all counts, O'Neill received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of bail. The judge, Michelle Cisco, described the case as the worst she had ever seen, emphasizing the cruelty of his actions.
Ron Nevaeh were especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel, that they suffered tremendously before dying.
She expressed her emotional disruption over the evidence presented, particularly the tragic fate of Ron Nevaeh, a child who deserved protection from the very person who was supposed to love her.
You know, as Teresa Ann left, I started thinking about why she had left and what could have been done differently during this whole process. And then I started going through some totes of hers. I found a tote that had miscellaneous journals, and I mean, I went through every item. I read every single page of every journal that she had ever written since she was a little girl. And the most shocking thing that I came across, and I even shared this with my mom and my sister Misty here, they both read the letter, is a letter that Teresa Ann wrote to her mom when she was a little girl. And it was addressed to her mom. It was sealed, but it was never stamped, never mailed off. And it talks about the sexual abuse that she endured at the hands of her father, Tim Lynch, and how she hated him for it. And these are quotes from the letter. It says, "I was young, only a little girl, so innocent and pure. He is evil and disgusting," and then talks about it. And then she talks about what he actually did to her, and this was over quite a period of time. That has got to be the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm not saying what I did was any better, but, you know, and then Teresa Ann talks in these journals about how her mom, she went to live with her mom in Texas, and Sheila talks about how her mom and Teresa Ann were so close, which was quite the opposite. I mean, there's so many journal entries. They've got the journals now. They can read through all of them. But Teresa Ann talks about how she went to live with her mom in Texas, and I've got this stuff memorized because I read it so many times. She went to live with her mom in Texas, and her mom was dating a guy named Farron. She was gone days in, days out, 2-3 days at a time. Teresa Ann and her siblings, Kathleen, would call, crying, telling their mom why they wanted her to come home, and her mom would be like, "You guys will be fine, just eat this, I'll be home in another day." Finally, DHS stepped in and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" Teresa Ann wrote in her journals how she lied to the DHS worker and acted like her mom was at work or at the grocery store or things of this nature, and finally it was too much. Neighbors stepped in, and DHS finally sent her back to live with her father in Garner, Iowa. And then that's when she talks about the physical abuse first, that her dad, I guess one time, there was one incident she really talks about a lot where her dad was taking her to go pick up a new car. She was going to buy a car, and how her dad punched her in the lip and made it bleed, and how he said, "If you say something else, I'm going to hit you again." So she said something else, and he made her lip bleed even more, and she's like, "Now I finally got the proof to go to the authorities and have my dad arrested for abusing me." But she never did come forward with the sexual abuse. My mom and my sister are sitting here in the courtroom. They're a witness to it. It's not like I'm making this up. They read the letter, and they both cried, and I was kind of upset about it. I mean, you know, to do that to your child is pretty sick and disgusting. So, talking about being a good parent, I was a good parent to my sons, both of them. I coached Taylor's Ankeny Little League team to a championship. I coached his AAU basketball team. I went to his classroom and did readings to his class. I've spanked my 11-year-old son one time in 11 years, and that was because he spit at his mom. And I cried for spanking him because I told myself when I was growing up I would never spank my kids no matter what. And my son Levi, I was there through the whole birth, prenatal classes. I mean, I did everything. Me and my wife was so happy about the whole thought of us having a baby, and we told each other no matter what. We went to marriage classes before we got married, and we told each other no matter what, we will fight to the end till there's nothing left to fight for. We would go to counseling, whatever happened, we would never just give up, because she talks in her journals about how her mom just walked out on her dad with no forewarning, no nothing, and how it ruined her life, and she hated her mom for that. And that's the reason she would never walk out on a relationship. Well, the day that Teresa Ann died, me and her had a conversation, and Teresa Ann, the first thing I told Teresa Ann, I gave her the letter that I wrote for her that talks about the postpartum depression and the things that was going on in her head that I didn't understand as a man, because I didn't know what postpartum was. I thought the reason my wife was bitchy. And
Randall Moore's story is one of a man consumed by rage and hatred, leading him down a dark path of violence and tragedy. On November 11, 2009, in Des Moines, Iowa, Moore brutally took the life of his wife, Teresa, in a fit of anger.
Randall Moore is charged with 4 felonies, including murder and attempted murder. Police say Moore killed his wife and wounded Des Moines police officer Todd Rowland in November of last year. News Channel 8's Mark Carlson was at the courthouse again today and has the latest developments.
The couple had a young child together, and Teresa had previously filed a protective order against Moore due to his violent behavior in the past. But on that day, Moore's rage knew no bounds.
My hand was mangled to the point where I could not I could not grip my weapon. I tried, and I just, it wouldn't work. And it was like something you see in a movie, and it was just kind of surreal, and it was a mess.
Police say Randall Moore shot and wounded Officer Todd Rowland, one of the first responders to the apartment building. Shortly after, Moore had this conversation with a 911 dispatcher. Listen as he indicates a motive for his actions.
As Teresa's screams for help echoed through the apartment they once shared, a brave law enforcement officer named Todd Rowland rushed to her aid. But when Rowland arrived at the scene, Moore turned his anger upon him, firing a weapon and seriously wounding the officer. Despite his injuries, Rowland managed to survive the attack.
You want me to tell you something?
Well, you can tell me whatever you want.
I didn't want to do any of this.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, all I wanted was my son. I just wanted to see my 7-month-old baby. That's all I cared about.
You just wanted to see your son?
Yep.
Where's your son at now?
Shortly after, Moore surrendered to the police, his wife's lifeless body lying on the floor beside him. When questioned about his actions, Moore admitted that he had killed Teresa because she wouldn't allow him to see their child. Moore's lack of guilt for human life was on full display during his trial. He was eventually sentenced to 3 life sentences for the crimes against Teresa, and an additional 25 years for the attempted murder of Officer Rowland.
There are certain lines that a judge should not cross in terms of judicial propriety. I always tried to live by that rule, and sometimes you just have to throw caution to the wind. And if I do cross that line today, I'm willing to cross it and pay the consequences. Let me start off by saying if anything should burn in hell, it's not Teresa Ann's yearbooks and her personal memorabilia. When you get to prison, there are 2 men you ought to look up because you have a lot in common. One of them I sentenced on May 3rd, 2010. He murdered his wife. She was divorcing him. He was lying in wait till she got out of work, then followed her on the freeway, pulled up beside her, put his weapon out the window, shot her, killed her. Of course, the car rolled over and over for a while before it came to a stop. I sentenced him for murder on May 3rd, 2010. On September 30th, 2010, I sentenced a young man to murder. Now, he wasn't married to the woman he murdered. He was living with her. And she was leaving him. He strangled her to death. You 3 have so much in common, I can't believe it. Yeah, shake your head, yeah, because you know you do. And I just can't believe what I've heard, but I am really glad you had your right of elocution and you could say everything that you said, because if anybody didn't know what a piece of work you were before you start talking, they know it now. The 3 of you that I'm talking, I've sentenced 3 people for murder in the last 7 months. And when I say you all have a lot in common, you sure do. And it's been said before, and you can't be said enough. You're cowards. You truly are cowards. You prey on women. They give you their love. They give you their trust, and you betray that. You betray it by physically and or mentally abusing these women. And they stay with you, notwithstanding that for a while. Because well, yeah, you're shaking. Because I think what they probably are doing is, I love this person. I trust this person. This must be some sort of aberration. This just is not the man that I married or that I fell in love with. And they're right. You weren't the man that they thought you were. So anyway, you start abusing them, and then when they finally have had enough, they try to leave. And you guys just can't understand why they leave such wonderful men like you. But they try to leave, and you can't stand that because you can no longer...
Now, Moore lives in the Anamosa State Penitentiary, where he will spend the rest of his days behind bars, a fate many believe he rightfully deserves.
Police say his estranged wife's dead body is laying on the floor.
He told me he had killed her.
Did he tell you why he killed her?
He'd said that he was upset because she wouldn't allow him to see his kids.
Did you mention anything at all about this being an accident?
No.
Was justice indeed served for Teresa and Officer Rowland, or should Moore have paid the ultimate price for his actions? Regardless of where one stands on the matter, it's clear that Randall Moore's actions have left a memorable effect on the lives of those he touched.
Okay, well, I'm not getting into any detail of what happened.
If you want to be guilty, you have to say what you did.
I'm not saying all right? Because of the respect and safety of my children, I'm not saying nothing, because they're gonna see this. They don't need to hear that. Understand what I'm saying? You know, let's just make this painless and not. Give me my 100 years or whatever, and give me the out of here.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, well do it. You understand me?
What you want.
I'm not doing this in front of these stupid cameras and these inbred.
On a tragic day in November 2014, Keith Ferguson's life took a dark turn that forever changed his family and community. Ferguson, a 40-year-old man from Kalkaska County, Michigan, admitted to killing his wife, Tiffany Ferguson. The couple had 4 young children together, and their separation had been filled with tension and conflict.
But when Judge George Mertz asked him to recall certain details of his crimes, that's when Ferguson became angry.
Okay, well, I'm not getting into any detail of what happened.
On that day, the children were home when the violence happened. Ferguson shot Tiffany in front of them, a scary act that left the kids traumatized. In a desperate attempt to escape the chaos, the children ran to a neighbor, crying out that their father had just shot their mother. The neighbor quickly called the police, but the nightmare was far from over when law enforcement arrived. After killing Tiffany, Ferguson went to the home of James Weber, Tiffany's father. There, he held Weber hostage for several hours, creating an even more terrifying situation. Eventually, Ferguson took Weber's life as well, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The police finally arrested him, and he was charged with first-degree murder for both killings. Ferguson's trial revealed a man who seemed detached from the gravity of his actions. He often displayed irregular behavior in court, yelling at the judge and refusing to take responsibility for his actions.
Court accepted Ferguson's guilty pleas, and Ferguson requested that he get the death penalty.
You can't give me the death penalty? I'll see y'all in hell.
I think that we, society, has got what we needed out of it, and I have had multiple discussions with the family, and this is what they were looking for as well.
He claimed guilt but showed no guilt, which shocked everyone present. His outbursts included insults directed at the judge, demonstrating a complete indifference to the proceedings and the pain he had caused. During sentencing, Tiffany's mother addressed Ferguson, reminding him of the effect his actions had on their children, who were now left without parents. The judge ultimately sentenced Ferguson to life in prison without the possibility of bail, a decision that reflected the severity of his crimes.
Have anything to say, Mike? Are they treating you okay?
Michael Swanson's case is like a haunted case that began on November 15, 2010, when he committed 2 shocking murders. At just 17 years old, Swanson stole his mother's Jeep and drove to a convenience store in Algona, Iowa, armed with a .40 caliber Beretta handgun.
After he was arrested and charged with 2 murders, Michael Swanson smiled at cameras and reporters.
Those first few pictures of him were really hard. When he was walking out of jail, those were really, really hard. I honestly try not to think about him.
Like the rest of us, that was the first time Mandy and Robin Myers saw the teenager accused of killing their mother, Sheila.
Inside the Crossroads convenience store, he faced 47-year-old Vicki Bowman Hall, demanding cash and cigarettes. After she resisted, he shot her without hesitation, leaving her lifeless on the floor.
2 months into your 18th year, and you have 4 gray walls to look forward to for the rest of your life.
Smiling and smirking, Michael Swanson appeared in 2 Iowa courtrooms today to learn his fate, and he got an earful.
And you have put my family, the other family, and your family through hell.
Swanson was sentenced in Fort Dodge for the murder of Sheila Myers in Humboldt. He also pled guilty in Algona for the murder of Vicki Bowman Hall.
But Swanson's night of terror didn't end there. He drove another 25 miles to a different convenience store in Humboldt, where he encountered Sheila Myers. Just like before, he pointed his gun at her and pulled the trigger, killing her as well. Swanson fled the scene with only $31 and some cigarettes in his pocket.
Michael said, quote, "I felt powerful. I just didn't care," unquote.
After the murders, the law quickly tracked him down, and he was arrested. During the investigation, it became clear that Swanson had a troubled past, filled with behavioral issues. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had a history of stealing and violence. Despite these warnings, he was released from a treatment center shortly before the murders.
I then intentionally, deliberately, and with premeditation shot the clerk, causing her to die. I did this with a specific intent to kill her.
In 2011, Swanson faced trial for his crimes. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree robbery for both killings. Swanson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but his story didn't end there.
Hall a chance to give victim impact statements. Two of Bowman Hall's sisters read brief statements, and her daughter Jillian shared several memories of her mother in an emotional statement.
Cold-blooded murder, young man.
As Michael Swanson was sentenced, he grinned, smiled, and laughed. But when he came into the courtroom, he appeared emotionless as he walked past Sheila Myers' family, the woman he murdered.
In 2013, the governor of Iowa commuted the life sentences of several young criminals, including Swanson, to 60 years, allowing him a chance at bail in the future. However, his violent behavior continued even in prison.
The judge called the case sad and senseless.
Cold-blooded murder, young man. And your counsel wants us to believe that you lack the capacity, that you were insane. And I don't buy into that. You are dangerous. You are unpredictable. And there is no place for you in an open, law-abiding society. Prison for the rest of your life is the only alternative. And the court intends to follow through.
As he left the courtroom, Swanson smiled once again. Myers' daughter said it was still hard to see.
In 2015, he was involved in an incident where he cut another inmate with a knife, leading to an additional 25-year sentence for attempted murder. Courtroom justice brings peace, but when killers show no remorse, it leaves deep scars on the victims' families. This chilling lack of empathy is a haunting reminder of true evil. Stay tuned for more crime videos.